Last 24 hours, the biggest story right now is the fresh round of military exchanges between the United States and Iran that have tested the fragile ceasefire in the Gulf. According to U.S. Central Command, American forces shot down 4 to 6 Iranian one-way attack drones over the past 2 days that were heading toward the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military said these drones posed an immediate threat to regional maritime traffic. In direct response, U.S. forces launched strikes on Iranian coastal surveillance radar sites on Keshm Island and in the Sirik and Goruk areas. Iran fired back with at least 7 ballistic missiles aimed at U.S. facilities and allies in Kuwait and Bahrain. Most of those missiles were intercepted by local air defenses or missed their targets, and there are no reported casualties so far. Tehran strongly condemned the American strikes. The Iranian Foreign Ministry called them a flagrant violation of the ceasefire and stated that the U.S. attacks demonstrate complete disregard for the principles of international law and the United Nations Charter. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman added that the United States is constantly changing its views and putting forward new or contradictory demands. This latest flare-up comes against the backdrop of a ceasefire that was agreed in early April 2026 after intense fighting that began on February 28, 2026. That earlier conflict involved major US and Israeli strikes on Iran and heavy Iranian retaliation across the region. Negotiations for a more permanent deal have been stalled for weeks. U.S. President Donald Trump has said the American blockade of Iranian ports will remain in full force and effect until an agreement is reached, certified, and signed. Iran has suspended some talks until it sees a complete ceasefire in Lebanon as well. The Strait of Hormuz is once again at the center of global attention. Roughly 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes through this narrow waterway. Any serious disruption here immediately affects energy prices, shipping insurance costs, and supply chains around the world. Even though commercial traffic continues under U.S. naval escort in many cases, the repeated drone and missile threats are keeping markets on edge. Reuters and BBC reporting both note that the United States is also exploring the use of frozen Iranian assets to help pay for reconstruction costs in Gulf countries damaged during the earlier phase of the conflict. This adds another layer of economic pressure on Tehran as talks drag on. Turning to other developments in the Middle East, violence continues at a lower level across Gaza and the West Bank. Israeli strikes in Gaza killed at least 7 people, including 2 women, according to Palestinian medics. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that Israeli soldiers opened fire on a car, killing a 7-month-old baby named Sam Fahad Abu Haikal and wounding both parents. Separately, a suspected terror attack in central Israel left 1 person dead and several others wounded. Israeli security forces responded quickly, eliminated 1 attacker, and launched a large manhunt. These incidents show that while the direct US-Iran exchanges dominate headlines, the broader regional conflicts remain active and deadly. Moving now to the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held high-level talks today in London with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The leaders discussed continued military support for Ukraine and ways to increase diplomatic and economic pressure on Russia. According to statements from the French presidency, the meeting focused on putting more pressure on Moscow at a time when Russia is facing military setbacks and growing internal discontent. Russian authorities reported that their air defenses intercepted 339 Ukrainian drones over a 13-hour period, targeting several regions, including areas around Moscow. These Ukrainian long-range strikes are increasingly bringing the war directly to Russian territory. President Vladimir Putin told reporters that he sees no point in meeting Zelensky to discuss ending the war. Zelensky has been pushing European allies to take a stronger role, especially as US attention is heavily focused on the situation with Iran. European leaders appear determined to maintain unity behind Kyiv. The London meeting is being described by diplomats as a signal that Europe is ready to step up coordination on both military aid and future peace efforts, even if the United States remains distracted by Middle East developments. In Spain, Pope Leo XIV began his first major trip outside Italy since becoming pope. This is also the first papal visit to Spain in 15 years. Large crowds lined the streets of Madrid today, with some reports putting attendance at over 1 million people for processions featuring elaborate flower carpets along the routes. Speaking at the Royal Palace in Madrid, the Pope urged political and religious leaders to stop fanning the flames of polarization. He said, "Today, the temptation to gain popularity by fanning the flames of polarization seems to have grown rather than diminished, and human dignity continues to be violated." The visit comes at a difficult moment for Spain, with political turmoil surrounding the socialist-led government, rising influence of the far right on immigration issues, and a credibility crisis facing the Catholic Church. Pope Leo is expected to meet with migrants and young people during his week-long stay, visit Barcelona and the Canary Islands, and become the first pope to address the Spanish Parliament. His messages are focusing on unity, care for the poor, and the need for peace amid ongoing wars around the world. In other political news, Kosovo held another snap parliamentary election today as the country continues to struggle with a long-running political crisis that has produced repeated early votes and unstable governments. Voter turnout and results are being closely watched by European Union officials who are trying to keep the Western Balkans on a stable path. North Korea also made headlines by reaffirming its nuclear weapons status just one day before the Chinese president's scheduled visit. Kim Jong-un's sister stated clearly that Pyongyang will not retreat from its nuclear program, sending a strong signal ahead of high-level diplomacy with Beijing. On a lighter, but still notable note, the death of Bernadette Chirac, the formidable former First Lady of France, was announced. She passed away at the age of 93. She was widely respected for her political influence and charitable work during her husband's long presidency. Looking at the bigger picture, the events of the past 24 hours show a world where multiple conflicts are simmering at the same time. The US-Iran exchanges in the Gulf are raising fresh concerns about energy security and the risk of wider escalation. The war in Ukraine continues with no immediate end in sight, even as European leaders try to hold the line. And in Spain, the Pope is using his platform to call for less division at a time when polarization is rising across many democracies. Global markets are watching the Strait of Hormuz particularly closely. Any sustained threat to shipping there could push oil prices higher and add to inflationary pressures in many countries. At the same time, the diplomatic efforts in London and the Pope's visit to Spain represent attempts to manage tensions and promote dialogue, even while fighting continues elsewhere.